Welcome back. So, earlier this year we had our first trailers for Batman v Superman. First we had the teaser trailer, and then we had the full-length trailer. And that got a lot of people talking. Some people really liked it, some people had concerns about it. But I'm not going to talk about that. But what did happen was people were starting to say that maybe DC could do what Marvel did, have its own interconnected universe of movies. And to me, it was like, yeah, they already did something similar to that. And if you're wondering, wait a minute, they never did a cinematic universe. DC has never had its own cinematic universe, interconnected movies. I didn't say it was movies, now did I? This is about cartoons. This is going to be a two-part video about the DC cartoon universe or DC animated universe. My own thoughts through the history when the first cartoon all the way up until the last one, which starts in 1992 with Batman, the animated series. This was an interesting cartoon, I gotta say. It was definitely different than what has been going on, especially in the 80s. A little bright and colorful and, very upbeat and tempo sort of a cartoon. But this one was darker, brooding, gave way to cartoons like Gargoyles. And it was really interesting. He had a great voice for Batman, Kevin Conroy, who will be consistent throughout the series of cartoons in the DC animated universe. So, the villains in this one are very good too. You have your classic villains, some of them are redone. Mr. Freeze is one of the most interesting characters because he's actually kind of a sympathetic character if he wasn't such a, something I shouldn't say for the children, to be honest. But the Joker had an interesting thing about him. He was definitely someone who had a great voice provided by Mark Hamill, that's for sure. And this gave way to the creation of Harley Quinn, who we all know and like in the DC comics, and who's actually basically getting her own movie with the Suicide Squad. So it was very interesting. The art style was very much reminiscent of a 1920s or even 1930s serial, in a sense that you had the Tommy guns, the old style cars. The buildings were kind of something you see in the sort of cartoons or comics in the 40s or 50s. So it was very interesting, I thought, and it lasted about 4 seasons. But for some reason, the seasons were kind of split off, and even became a new series called The Adventures of Batman and Robin, which gave way to the WB creating The New Adventures of Superman. Yes, this one was in 1996, if I believe correctly. This was the first season of Superman. Different style, again, a little bit darker, very square. Superman had a very big, square jaw. it was kind of unique, especially when you consider there wasn't a lot of boxiness in some of the other cartoons at that time. So Superman in this one had a good voice as well. I wish I remember who did his voice, but I don't right now. Yes, the good voices for Lois Lane, for Lex Luthor, Metallo. Yeah, Clockwork Orange himself, Malcolm McDowell. He voiced the voice Metallo in this one, and it was really one of those cartoons that helped bridge Batman's return into the WB, because if I'm not mistaken, he was actually on Fox at the time, and then boom, they moved him into WB, and for its fourth and final season, which became The New Adventures of Batman and Superman. New art designs, some of them were good, some of them were hit and miss, some of them I liked, some of them were okay, and some people didn't really get changed that much. But there was definitely some cool stuff going on in this, and so much so that both of these cartoons actually had movies in them. Yeah, in the original Batman series, they actually had Batman Mask of the Phantasm, which even I believe got a theatrical release. I saw it in the movie theater, well, at least in the signs. I didn't watch it in the theaters, but it definitely had a place for the new type of cartoons that weren't the upbeat stuff that we saw in the late 80s and even the early 90s with the Ninja Turtles. I'm a big Ninja Turtles fan, but you have to admit it was something different when you wanted something like a Batman or even Superman. So, and also in 1998, if I'm trying to remember what year that came out, they finally ended the story with Mr. Freeze, because his whole thing was trying to get a cure for his wife, so she can come out of a cryogenic stasis. It was an interesting movie, especially with the person who was helping Dr. Freeze, because the only reason he wanted to is because he wanted Dr. Freeze to recreate the accident that made him for this guy, because he wanted to live forever. And it's another one of those stories of people wanting to live forever and then at some point basically regretting their decision. If you ever watch the movie, which I recommend you do, you'll know what I mean. I may even prefer that one over Mask of the Phantasm, because it didn't have to introduce a new character like Mask of the Phantasm did. You had an established character, and we were just basically seeing the end of their story, what should have been. But he came back as well in the New Adventures of Batman and Superman. Also, for the movie's sake, it was a Batman and Superman movie called World's Finest. Yeah, it's a nice little title for that movie. And it was basically their first meeting, and they're not trusting each other, but then coming together and basically being friends. The one thing I did like about when they brought them together is that it made the universe kind of, or at least that world, interconnected, especially with Superman when they're introducing new heroes like the Flash and other villains from different, the Weather Master from Flash's Rogues Gallery. Also, they brought in Nightwing for this series. Not enough Nightwing, I think. Not enough Nightwing. If I were to say one little flaw about the new Batman of season 4, but there was only one season. They didn't really have a lot of episodes to bring in Nightwing. But there were some really good stories. Both Batman and Superman had some episodes I think could be a top 5s and top 10s. People even made top 10 episodes of Batman. So, yeah, that was the start of it from 92 all the way into 99, I believe, when the last Superman cartoon had ended. Some really good villains, some pretty memorable, some were just introduced for the show and then never heard from ever again. But all in all, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed both those cartoons pretty well. But that's not the end of it. No, that's not the end of it. No, there's much more beyond this. Yeah, I know, that was a kind of a lame joke. I didn't really do it justice. Oh, yeah, that was stupid. But was it much of a shock? Oh, that's the last one, I promise. That's the last stupid joke I made. But I wanted to make this video quick because these two cartoons have been talked about a lot, so I didn't really need to add too much. So, for this part, I want to ask, what's your favorite episode of Batman, Adventures of Batman and Superman? From the first series with just Batman, or when they were together, they joined them together with Batman and Superman. What are some of the episodes you really liked? So, that's all I've got. Stay tuned for part 2, and later.